NSF. There are many, many cohorts throughout the year, somewhere between 12 and 16 cohorts over a course of a year with 20 to 25 teams per cohort to give you a rough estimate of the number of teams that are going through this program. For the most part, these are pre-company formation teams. Each team gets a $50,000 administrative supplement award. For you academics, that might mean something. Teams that are eligible have to have been through a program like what you're going through here at Penn, or they need to have NSF lineage, meaning they've received an NSF grant in the past. They're also looking for teams with intellectual property, and they really need a mechanism to get this money into a university. And so that's the primary reason, like, undergraduate student teams are not fundable through the I-Corps program. They really need that PI or that lab to deposit the money into for the grant. So in this short course, you only really touched very briefly on customer segments and value propositions. In the quote-unquote national program, you're going to touch on each and every box on that business model canvas. You're still going to spend a ton of time on customer segments and value propositions. But really, the course, once you go through the national program, hopefully you'll be in a position that you can talk very intelligently about everything from either revenue model, what's the best channel to get your product to your customers, marketing, which is called customer relationships on the business model canvas, to you've explored partnerships and what your partners may be looking for, and you've thought about your cost structure and the key activities that will be necessary to advance your product kind of to the next critical milestone. So this is a 7-week program, and as you heard from Nikki, very time intensive. It has this 3-day launch at the beginning. This is in person for all people on the team. And these are typically 3 people team, sometimes 4. I'm going to get into a little bit more details about who's on that team. Everybody has to attend 100% of the entire program. So there's a 3-day launch that's in person for all team members. There are weekly WebEx sessions that are mandatory for all members of the team. And then there's a 2-day closing session that is also mandatory for all members of the team. In addition, there are weekly office hours that are strongly encouraged with the instructors, as well as the interview volume of 15 plus interviews per week, plus the reading, plus the video and the planning. So I would say on average, a lot of teams most members of the team are spending somewhere between the low end would be 10 hours, probably average closer to 15 hours, 20 hours per week. For the entrepreneurial lead, this is the person, typically the postdoc or the graduate student. A lot of the work falls on them, but they should be highly supported by the principal investigator and an industry mentor. So the NIH program is quite similar. The primary difference is that these teams have actually already been awarded a phase 1 SBIR from NIH. These teams opt into this program, that you might be recommended to this program by your program manager. You're being recommended to participate by your program manager. I generally suggest that you follow their recommendation. That means that they think that you probably could benefit more than other teams from participating in this program, and would have a most likely be able to put together a stronger phase 2 application. So again, it's $50,000. It's really helping you think through that commercialization plan that is a critical component for the phase 2. And for those of you who have never submitted a SBIR grant, typically teams can have multiple attempts at submitting a phase 1, but you typically only get one shot at submitting a phase 2 grant. So if you want to do it right, you should put in the work in advance so you can submit the strongest application process possible. And the best way to doing that is going through this NIH I-Corps program. So similar to the NSF version, 3 days in person at the beginning. Here you have 6 weekly WebEx sessions. These are 3 to 4 hours on typically Wednesday afternoons. and again, 2 days at the end. Again, you're going through this as a cohort. There's a lot of group learning. Um, so it's a great process. So unlike the NSF, where you have teams focusing on all sorts of different technologies, everything from biotech to materials to IT to apps, in the NIH program, you'll probably be grouped you'll either be in the therapeutic room, medical device room, or what we call the other room, which is a lot of times health IT, diagnostics, research tools. So here's a little overview of what the teams look like, the makeup, the 3-person teams. So in each team, so for the NSF, you have this entrepreneurial lead. This is, as I mentioned earlier, kind of the graduate student or postdoc. You have the PI, which hopefully you're familiar with if you're coming from an academic setting, and an industry mentor. Industry mentor is somebody hopefully who has some experience in the industry that you're pursuing. A lot of times your tech transfer office or innovation center, Tomas, can help you identify this person if you don't have someone in mind. The entrepreneurial lead, I believe, receives a stipend through this grant. So some of the $50,000 can be used to pay that entrepreneurial lead for their time participating in this program, since they will be cutting back their time in the lab. The PI does not receive any money, nor does the industry mentor. So on the NIH team, these again are already companies. So typically there's a C-level person from the company participating. This is the person who's going to be the primary contact with the NIH. I don't know why it says NSF there. And then a PI. So this is the person who actually put together the technical milestones and is really leading the technical effort at the company. And again, an industry expert. So sometimes we've seen members of their board or other folks with relationships with this company. So the $50,000, as you heard before, this is primarily used for travel. So that's slightly different. For the NSF, as I mentioned, it gets funneled through the academic lab. For the NIH, it obviously goes into the actually formed company. So for the NSF grant, some of it, the money does get used for the entrepreneurial lead. A small portion of it can be used for kind of prototype development, but you have to have actually the approval of your program manager to get to that point. And so that's very, very far down the road. And I would say most teams don't ever get to that point. So the vast majority of the money is used for hotel, airfare, attending conferences, and teams are strongly encouraged to use as much of that money as they can during the actual I-Corps course. So we have teams that are currently going through this right now for both the NIH program and the NSF, and I actually text out to my colleagues who are teaching those cohorts to try to understand how they're managing now that they can't really travel or use a lot of that money, and it sounds like they're just extending these grants. But all I can tell you, pre-COVID, we would encourage teams to, again, look at look at conferences and plan what cohort they would like to apply to based on key conferences in their industries that they could potentially attend, because that's a great way of getting a lot of interviews in a short amount of time. You want to strategically plan a couple conferences at least during your 6, 7, 8 week I-Corps cohort.
If you are about to put in an SBIR grant for NIH, is it helpful to have done this Penn I-Corps in a sense? Do you think that would be helpful?
Yes, I think really being able to define that clinical problem that you're going after, or being able to reference actual conversations with people who are dealing with this day in, day out, just kind of validates that this isn't just an idea, that you've actually spent some time researching the problem and know the customer pains, what they're seeking, what they've tried, what's what's the real burning issue that you're getting at. It's just going to help you articulate your value proposition and, the impact statements as you apply for those grants. NSF SBIRs have a more traditional commercialization section, so it's even more important for the NSF. NIH, it's more, I think the phase ones are still more scientific, but I still think that if you can talk, use the lingo around value proposition and customers, that's important.